there's always that mix of traditional things like a decision tree, fairly easier to explain, or a logistic regression. Some of those things are easy to explain, but as you move on to more like a GBM and machine learning models, it gets harder because some of them are black box.
Hello and welcome to the AI Master Group podcast, featuring the people who are building the future of AI in their work today. I'm your host, Jim Griffin. Today, I am very happy to have as my guest Jasmeet Bhatia, who's the Decision Science Lead at Truist. Prior to that, he was the AVP of Retail Deposit Analytics at SunTrust, which merged with Truist. And prior to that, he's had key roles at Capital One and at Cognizant. Now, the way that we met is because Jasmeet was recently recognized with the Rising Star in Data and Analytics Award at the Chief Data and Analytics Officer Conference in Boston. Welcome, Jasmeet.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
I'm really glad to have you here, Jasmeet. You know, we know from the introduction that you were named as a rising star in data and analytics at the CDAO, Chief Data and Analytics Officer Conference in Boston recently. What were some of the activities that you've been involved in that you think probably led to that award?
Yeah, I think the judges would be the best to say that what really they found good in me. But I'm first of all really humbled to be recognized at that kind of a forum. I think I have been fortunate enough to work on really pretty interesting problems in last 15 years in industry. I've worked partially in India and then majority in the States, and I think the problems which I've solved and some of the problems have been really novel, which have led to patents being granted by the USPTO. I think those were some of the projects which I'm really proud of, and I assume that's something which was a distinguishing factor. Apart from my work, I really enjoy working outside and volunteering at different places. I'm part of an advisory council for multiple universities in the States. It's part of their data science master's program. So helping them organize that program, building the curriculum. So that's been really an amazing experience. And like you said, the conference which is there. So I've been part of, I think, a couple of conferences last couple of years where I've been actively being invited to present and share my thoughts on different perspectives as we see data science becoming more and more relevant to business strategy. So we see that coming in, and I've been going to like Evanta or CDAO conferences or American Statistical Association. Those have helped me to maybe build my brand and be recognized at these kind of platforms. So that's where I think my passion for also helping college students with the financial education and bringing in my work to my day-to-day life. I think all this mix match probably helped me be nominated for this award and then being the winner for it.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like there was some part of it that was your work had high impact, like the patents and so forth. And then there's probably this other aspect that is this degree of activity in conferences and in these advisory councils. I think when we were talking, you also mentioned to me that you did some volunteer work related to data and analytics. Is that possible that that might also have been a dimension that was considered?
That could be. I have been involved with a couple of datathons, like in North Carolina, there is a datathon which happens. That's where I go and mentor students. I have worked with organizations like SIFMA, which is like building financial education for high school and college students. That's there. And in my own state, Virginia, there is a datathon done by the state government, which annually they do, and I'm really proud of participating in that for a couple of years, and then being as a mentor as well, where they'll pick up a social challenge and try to ask everybody to come on the table. People from the government come in, people like us civilians will go in, or technical people or people with policy making. They come in together and think about an innovative way to work on any social cause. And just to add there, I think back in 2020, they had one topic related to food insecurity, while we saw long lines outside the food banks, and people at their homes were scared to go to food banks to be to donate food in person and things like that. So we developed we proposed a technical solution in terms of that last mile. So the concept of Amazon, the last mile delivery, we took that similar parallel and be like the last mile pickup for somebody wants to donate a food. So built a website around that, and proposed to the government. And in fact, we won an award for that. Was the third place in the data-thon, and that that tool was helping really go at the micro level, each neighborhood, and something like if you have something to donate, you can put a request on that website based on the zip code. There could be a food truck coming from the pantry and picking it up and putting in like route optimization and things like that. So, but leveraging our data science and technology backgrounds and putting it to some use for the I would say well-being of the society. I think I'm very humbled to be part of it. And then I think those kind of things, I think all came in together, and I think that all helped.
Yes, I think so too. I think it's all there. It's a complete package. So, and I remember also that there were a number of other people that were considered for that award that also had very impressive resumes, very impressive projects. And so it was quite impressive for you to be considered number one in that regard. So well done.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Speaking of well done, one of the other things that I noticed as I was looking at your profile online is that moving even further back, you were already in some pretty senior leadership roles within, let's say, 5 years after starting your career. Can you describe your journey from formal education to the point where you started being named for leadership roles in data science?
Yeah, one thing like there was no while I was growing up, there was no formal degree in data science. So I don't have still a formal degree in data science, but uh, I grew up in India, and there is a big focus on excellence in academics in India, and I would say it's skewed a lot towards that. Now it's balancing out as things have matured, but I started doing my undergrad in technology, and worked for my client Nokia. So I used to build a lot of like software systems over there on chips, things like that. And as I was working on technology, I really wanted to understand broadly how business works, and that led me to pursue my MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur, which is one of the elite B schools in India. And after that, I joined Cognizant Business Consulting, where I was working for some of the clients in UK, and then I started working for clients in US. And back in 2011, I moved to the States. Uh, since then, I've been here, and at that time, I started working for my client was Capital One, and it was pretty interesting on some of the problems they were trying to solve in the digital transformation space. And I would say that they are a lot ahead in that curve in that digital and adoption of technology. So I was fortunate to work on some of the projects over there, and as I gathered better understanding about the US economy, how clients interact, and how banking is done, I moved on to another regional player, SunTrust, and was part of the credit risk team over there. At that time, I joined as an AVP in the credit risk team, and spent couple of years in the credit risk space. And then I was like, I wanted to try to do something different. And I was like, why should I shift my employer if they let me do something different within the organization. So I've been fortunate enough to have a management where it's always they're receptive about listening and trying new things. So, um, but after I worked for credit risk, I worked in different parts of the bank, deposit, small business, digital, and it was like just getting to know different parts of the bank and how the whole banking evolves. So that's been my journey, I would say.
Very good. So I know that you just mentioned SunTrust, and I know you've been working there for more than 3 years, and they merged with Truist. So I'm wondering, were there any implications of that merger from a data science perspective? Any big tasks or learnings from a database standpoint, for example?
Yeah, so I've been working for SunTrust. I started working for them back in 2013, so it's been around 12 years now. And back in 2019, SunTrust merged with another big bank, BB&T, and they formed Truist. Uh, so since then, I've been working for Truist. That's a new brand, the name of the company. And also, as I talk more about my organization, I just want to add a caveat, like the views expressed here are my own. I'm not representing my employer here. But from a merger perspective, I would say I learned a lot. That was my first time uh, as a data professional working in an organization which went through such a big merger. At that time, it was like the biggest merger of equals happening in the industry. And two big regional powerhouses, which have been traditional old banks with a lot of legacy systems coming together. And they're like, okay, day one, we need to start thinking about how the whole entity works now. I still consider it as a startup with a lot of history. It was a lot chaotic, as you can expect, a lot of different databases, you kind of bringing it together. The data definitions of how do you define a client, what are the different product codes, you have to change a lot of queries. And then at the same moment, some parts of, like say it's a auto loan origination, bank A had something and bank B had another tool, and then they decided after merger to use a tool C for the new entity.
You're listening to the AI Master Group podcast.
A had something and bank B had another tool, and then they decided after merger to use a tool C for the new entity. So you had the legacy data in A and B, and then you had new data flowing in from a new application C. So you got to mishmatch all that together because still the bank needs to make decisions. They need to know what happened in the last 2 years or 1 year, how the client's looking like, what are the preferences. So it was a lot of regrounding and understanding, like unlearning and relearning. That's how they say. So I had to do a lot of that and finding the right people to understand where the data exists. How can you access it? How do you merge things together? How do you still make a consistent view because the business has to run the show? How do you bring in consensus? So it was a lot about working with people. It's not just the data. That's where I think I was really humbled in the power of team working together, building that consensus, ensuring everybody's on the same page and working towards a common goal. And as mergers happened, there was a lot of like turnover in talent. People leave, people are not happy, and sometimes the companies don't want so many people, right? So there was some natural attrition, there was some people not working. So there were a lot of like knowledge gaps which are happening. Again, that led to the importance of why things like basics, like while we are talking about AI and things like that in today's world, but why things like a data dictionary or a basic document which has the definitions is important because you never know what happens in the future. Banking is evolving a lot, and there could be more mergers in the future happening in any other, not just our employer. So how critical it is to understand the grain of data and being able to explain, because ultimately, while we are explaining to business, they are not concerned about the three places you're pulling from. So it was hard, something was down, the definitions don't match, or things like that. They want to have an answer, right? They got to run the business, because in banking, it's people's money is involved. And we also had pandemic hitting that time. So there were a lot of like people had hardships, and small businesses were going through different changes, and government was introducing different programs. So there's so much of new stuff happening in the macro level, rates just dropping down. And I'm very fortunate to say that as a data professional, I've always been very closely working with the strategy teams, with the business teams, the product teams, and having that mindset and lens has always helped me to think about what's our end product from the data work we are doing. If it's a basic statistical work, basic analysis, or we're building a model or whatever, right? So what's the business goal you're trying to achieve? So I think that the merger made it compoundingly harder to give that answer in a timely fashion.
Yes, that sounds very realistic. And the insight that you mentioned about the documentation, which never seems urgent at the time, but boy, when you need it, it sure is worth its weight in gold. Yes. So, based upon what you've just said, I've imagined you've done plenty of work with machine learning models. So, what kinds of models or use cases have you worked with? And how did those turn out for you?
Yeah, and I would say it's been a mix of machine learning as well as more traditional statistical models like regression and decision tree and things like that. Like I said, started with credit risk. There are a lot of models which are there, but those are still at that time they were more traditional models which were there. And as we've evolved, there is now a blend of machine learning and traditional models happening. And sometimes we used to do more like a quick analytics, because as models take time to build, or you got to get the approval and documentation, but maybe the business environment changes at that time. So there was a always a mixed match of things. But going to in specific about use cases, credit risk was one. Then I was working in deposits. So it was like, would a checking client, how likely they are to accept a CD offer? As back in 2016, the rates started rising. And now we saw that again, rates rising last couple of years. There is always a flow of funds to high interest bearing accounts like a CD on an MMA. So which client is likely to accept that offer? Or potentially like which client is rate sensitive, right? So who do you think is at risk of leaving you to a competitor because of the interest rate? And then marketing side, like, hey, they are a deposit client, but we want to deepen with them with a credit card offer. So a propensity model. Last couple of years, I also worked on the digital engagement side. So it was like there's still a ton of clients who would like to walk into the branch and do their business in person. So how do you migrate that behavior digitally? So who's likely to adopt to a digital banking, and how do you get to that? Or if they are digitally banked, how can they adapt to new tools we are offering? Who might be your early adopters for a new feature in your chatbot, things like that.
Yeah, so obviously, as far as use cases, you're covering some things that would be highly expected, like churn risk, various kinds of propensity models, depending upon the thing, whether it's a CD or some kind of new feature of an app and so forth. So those propensity models and other kinds of scoring. And from a technical standpoint, you mentioned stochastic models as well as some of the classic machine learning decision trees and so forth, some very classic models. And I'm thinking that because you are in banking and dealing with people's money, I would imagine that explainability would be a key factor in your work. It probably is quite important. So, how does that play out in your work, the models that you choose and so forth, from that lens?
Yeah, now you brought up a really important topic, and banking is a pretty regulated industry, and not just us, but altogether the industry is always under pressure to um, being able to explain the decision, especially when it involves to credit. consumers have a right to receive that information in terms of what was the reason that their application for a credit card was declined or approved. So you gotta have that decision, you gotta explain to regulators, you gotta explain to auditors, and that's how it brings in trust in the bank as well as in the back end. Like if you see the models which are going, the trust comes in. So there, like I was telling earlier, we there's always that mix of traditional things like decision tree, fairly easier to explain, or a logistic regression. Some of those things are easier to explain, but as you move on to more like a GBM and machine learning models, it gets harder because some of them are black box. On one hand, we do see there is a significant Gini coefficient index lift if you leverage a machine learning model rather than a traditional model. So there is that business impact, and there is that in that same risk appetite, you can lend to more people, you can make better decisions, you'll have lower charge-offs, which drives the value of why one should adopt to machine learning models. But explainability is definitely a big barrier. But there are ways to do it. You can do like while building the model, or you can do it like more post hoc approach. And sometimes it could be we combine a more traditional model with a machine learning model, like leveraging alternate data. Things like how cash flows are working for that client, or how they are paying, how they are doing things outside the traditional credit score box. So bringing up, overlaying a machine learning model on a traditional model helps to manage it well. And I think, like we all know, you need to have that global explanation of the model, and then you need to have that local at an individual level why this decision was made. There are some techniques which are widely used, like post ad hoc, like the Shapley, but doing it upfront helps to reduce the time. So it's always better to build that explainability into the model, or you can more post building models is around using Lime or SHAP or some of those techniques to try to explain the importance of each feature, to how it led to a positive or a negative impact to the decision.
Yes. Those techniques that you mentioned are obviously very much well understood by now, because there is this need, not just in banking and credit, but really in the world in general. Managers and executives want to understand the models as much as possible. So it's interesting that there is this range where you're pushing for better performance. Ultimately, that's what's behind this, as you alluded to. You're pushing for better performance while trying to ensure explainability at the same time. And you're squeezing the balloon basically. As you increase your explainability, you might be decreasing your model performance, and conversely. So one of the other things that you mentioned, you alluded to just a while ago, was a focus on metrics. And I remember a discussion we had about a metrics-driven approach that you use for double checking to be sure that you're delivering sufficient value to the company as a department or even as a single contributor, I think it involved ratios of salary or that to revenue. How did that work? Remind me about that.
Yeah, that's something one of my managers early on in my career, he was pretty clear about that. It was like 10 years back. He was pretty clear about, we don't want to be a cost center. Data should be a business, a revenue driving thing. It should be something which nobody should question in terms of why do you need 10 data scientists or 5 data scientists, right? So you should always be ahead of the curve in terms of explaining the value to the business. So I think it was an easy formula which my boss gave to us was, when you think about your salary, think about 7x returns from your salary. So 4x in terms of revenues generating initiatives, 3x in terms of expense savings. So that was a number which was really easy to understand, and it resonated well within our team, and everybody used to, when you're working on a project, there could be things like reporting. You gotta do reporting, right? You gotta do those things as you understand what's going on in the business and give that to business. But we were able to carve out a population within a budget of 100K for marketing, and that resulted in 2x returns, whereas last year when you were doing it like randomly, it did not give you that return. So documenting some of that, working well with your partners, being in marketing, product, in finance, and while the business cases are being built or while we're looking at performance, bringing that dollar impact, even if it's an estimate, it's really helpful in terms of when we are promoting our work. It's always helpful, and especially when there are centralized data science teams. Sometimes in some organizations, it's pretty federated, but if it's a centralized data science team, how do you ensure that the 50 or 100 people which are working there or 300 people which are working there are adding value? So doing it on a monthly basis and or a quarterly basis as a team coming together and sharing with each other and sharing how you worked with finance, how you led to some of the calculations which are like say FTP rates or things like the lifetime value of a client. So that mindset helps us to connect well with business as well as document um, some of the impact we are making to the organization.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing that you did mention, but is always on our minds, is we achieve something, and then the immediate thought is, okay, now what? Now what do we do next? Because it starts to become, well, that's what you did last year. So now that's your baseline. It's all fun. So this has been great, Jasmeet. If people want to follow up on any of the topics that we talked about today, how can they get in touch with you?
I think LinkedIn is the best answer. They can reach out to me, DM me on LinkedIn, or they can also email me at my email address. So it's bhatia@gmail.com. So people can email me. Feel free to reach out, connect, and let's try to make it a better learning for all of us.
Great. That's very generous of you also to share your email. Well, this has been great as I knew it would be. Obviously, you're an award winner, multiple award winner, and it's been very inspiring. Thank you very much for spending the time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim, for having me over here, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
You've been listening to the AI Master Group podcast. I'm your host, Jim Griffin. Until next time, stay curious and stay in front.